Good evening, welcome to All About Auckland. I'm Kane Glass. This week we're at Maraetai Beach. The homes and businesses along here are all built on shell bank below the floodplain level. As storm frequency increases, insurance is getting harder to find. This week we feature two big debates of the year. The transport referendum debate and the rates cap debate. But first, let's watch the Unitary Plan Hearings panel expose the holes in the Council's catchment policy planning, or lack of it.
I wanted to ask a similar question about land use and water management in the catchment sense. Another witness commented on the lack of a catchment-based approach in the Council. What is the state of the Council's catchment planning program?
I'm wondering if there's somebody better to answer that question than myself on that issue in terms of the catchment planning program. But there's certainly been a change from more global catchment planning to more issue-based and more locality-specific planning, particularly around stormwater. But I certainly can't comment on much broader catchment planning issues.
Yeah, well, I guess as Anne Mayhew sort of said before, and the questions from the hearing commissioners about integration of land use and development and those aspects of a requirement of the NPS, and they've been captured by the policy that they've brought forward.
We've got one more witness that can answer that, will address that question.
Thank you. Kirsty McDonald. So the NPS has provisions in it that specifically require Council to consider the integration of managing land use with the effects on both freshwater and the coastal receiving environments. At the moment we are working through with our colleagues across Council to develop that programme. It is part of the programme will be looking at how, when we go into an area, perhaps I just take a step back, the 2014 version of the NPS introduced the term freshwater management units, and it's based on those units that we need to set freshwater objectives and quality and quantity limits for as described in the NPS. And for those units we will need to look at how we integrate and ensure that land use, impacts of land use does not have an adverse effect on the water quality and quantity for both freshwater, and then an impact on the quality of our coastal receiving environments. Is that?
So there's a program for giving effect to the NPS, but what about the catchment planning program? Is there no such thing? Or have you covered it, Mr. Mayhew, with your answer, which was the issue-based, responding on an issue-based level rather than in some aerial plan?
No, sorry, I haven't covered that issue. I'm just talking specific from the stormwater perspective.
Yeah. I understood what you said about stormwater handling.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm unclear. In regards to causation and those catchment plans, is it going to be one catchment plan for the whole region, or is it going to be catchment plans per area where that nexus or that causation occurs?
I'm sorry, I'm not the best person to answer that question. Obviously this plan covers the whole region. I'm not aware of what Council's intentions are. You've heard from Ms McDonald about the NPS freshwater, but I'm not aware around where Council is going with other catchment plans, or whether it's looking at broader catchment plans, but I'm sure we can. You answer that?
I know that the stormwater unit have their consolidated receiving environments and catchment management planning around those catchments, and as I said, as part of the NPS implementation work, we will be looking at expanding that to include other parts and bringing in other discharges and the takes as well.
Next up, we've got the transport referendum debate. The option of funding transport capital works out of a network charge has angered many councillors, Cathy Casey among them. Cathy found an unlikely ally with Dick Quacks at the council meeting this week.
So today it's not about the CRL, it's not about funding, it's about the democratic process. And I would ask everyone to support the right of all Aucklanders to have a say at this stage in the way Auckland is shaped into the future. Because we haven't, as council, we didn't get to have a say in these options. These are the options that have come to us that we're putting out for public discussion. But one of those options in there changes the face of Auckland totally, and that's the motorway network charge. I believe that most people in Auckland would see that as abhorrent. That every time you go on a motorway, you pay a charge. Completely changes the way we live in the city, the way we move around the city. And for me, it's not an option. And I actually believe that the people of Auckland will give a resounding no. And a wee history lesson. I've been a councillor here for 10 years, and we have had the Waterview connection. I'll just remind you a little bit about the Waterview connection. Back in 2007, the then government asked how we should fund it. They said, we don't have enough money to fund it. And so they formed a working party, which I think Stephen Selwood was part of. And they came up with a couple of options. One was public-private partnership and a toll. That was in about the middle of 2007. They did a survey. 97% said no. 97% said no. And by January or February 2008, both the public-private partnership was out the window and the toll. And the government found the money to build the tunnel.
I had to reiterate the fact that we actually, without any dissent, we signed off the significance and engagement policy recommended to this meeting here today from Budget Committee. No dissent whatsoever. So I'm looking forward to a really deep conversation, not a tick box conversation. A binding referendum does not allow that deep conversation. And the amendment itself ignores the qualitative feedback, it ignores the smart engagement tools that are in this new policy that we've just adopted, it ignores unenrolled voters. I think Councillor Webster just pointed that out. It ignores our desire to put children and young people first, the under 18-year-olds. Right. We've made that point time and time again, and Councillor Casey is one of the first to remind us of putting children and young people first. They are disenfranchised from a referenda, be it binding or unbinding.
About the same time you spoke to a business lunch in Auckland, and you reportedly said strong community buy-in for tolls in a referendum at the 2013 local body elections would strengthen the case with whoever was in government. And at the time, commentators kind of commended you for showing the courage of your convictions and putting the funding solution to the people of Auckland. And I just fear that this organisation over the last 12, 13 months has really lost its nerve and we saw that with the rates transition management policy, with taking things to the public. I feel that because we're heading down these promises of a referendum are now being broken because there's the political fear that it would instantly become a referendum, dare I say, on the leadership of the organisation, and subsequently
okay. Point of order.
It wouldn't
Stop.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
There is, I've always given you a bit of latitude. Just keep focused on the subject.
Exactly.
There's no purpose in getting personal, either with me or any alleged comments that I've made. Keep focused on why you think it would be a good idea to have a referendum and not do it through an LTP process and then potentially a referendum after that. I'll leave to me the benefit or otherwise of actually debating my position with the media and the community.
Well, that's my personal view, Your Worship, and I stick.
Then move on.
I stick to that because 10 years ago, when I was working here in the town, or 10, 12 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce, the EMA, were doing a series of polls and surveys, and they found, when it was identified that it was costing Aucklanders $1 billion in lost productivity and time, they found that 80-90% of Aucklanders said, yes, we are prepared to pay a toll or tax to get us out of that gridlock. And so I don't know, with that statistical background, why we aren't ready to go out to the public. And again, as other speakers have said, this is not the only option. This is a suite of options.
Firstly, I want to say I don't envy your job. I have no doubt that you will end up getting backstabbed no matter what happens, and from a result of this and the other decisions that we have made. I have no doubt that at this stage you may have been backstabbed already. Your Worship, from my perspective, I will not be supporting the referendum, and I am not going to repeat what Councillor Darby has said, because he has raised some of the issues that I wanted to raise. What I will, however, raise is the numbers. It's about consultation, and it is about genuine consultation. We've read in the report, Your Worship, around only people on the electoral roll. We've also heard you talk about having an option in regards to going out to our communities with a referendum. Your Worship, in my two local boards, or our two local board areas, we will, if this goes through, we will be saying to at least over 20,000 young people under the age of 15, no, you cannot be involved personally in regards to this referendum. You will be saying to over 20,000 under 15-year-olds in Māngere o Tāhuhu, you cannot be involved personally in regards to this referendum because you are under the age of 18 and you are not on the electoral roll. Add a few more thousand, Your Worship, add a few more thousand to the people that are from 15 to 18 that cannot go on to electoral roll. Add also a few more thousand, Your Worship, with 296,350 people and young people under the age of 15.
This debate cannot be redacted down to a simple referendum question. And the discussion around here from my colleague shows me that this will be redacted down to, do you support tolls or not? That's not the discussion. So it's proved to me, if I was feeling marginally well inclined towards a referendum at this stage, the debate has made me now absolutely clear that I will not support a referendum at this stage. This is our chance to talk with our community via the LTP on the shopping list of transport options. What do you think of the things we will buy? Secondly, what do you think of the options for paying for them? Let's give you the chance to be well informed around those options. Then, if an option requires governmental support, legislative change, let's back that up with a referendum. That's what we're saying.
I've been through 2 mayoral campaigns making it very clear to the people that I felt we needed to have a debate and a discussion. What the outcomes of that were was up to them, and we will try and reflect those outcomes. But this has been, I have not heard anyone else out there arguing for this. In all of the election meetings that I've been to, it's been a specific policy platform for me in my mayoral campaigns. That's the first thing. 2 lots of mandates around this. And it's been tough. How do you go out and tell people, hey, look, we've got to reach in our pockets and pay for a transformation of our transport? So that's the first thing, is that this has been a matter that we have been developing, more than 5 years now. And the people have been aware that we're coming up to this discussion. So, on the basis that we would go to the community as is proposed and put to them basically what are 4 options, not one. If you're going to do a referendum, here's the option, boom. What we are proposing to them is a rates and or a petrol tax increase, or secondly, one of either 2 options around a network charge, either a fixed or floating rate, or thirdly or fourthly, don't do anything. That's in effect what people will come back to. They could come back to us and say, Mr. Mayor, we don't like any of it. And I'm completely realistic and open about that as being a possible outcome. Aucklanders will do what they've always done, nothing. You know, we'll just meander along.
We need to look up and engage. This LTP process is just about that. We are looking forward and we are looking to engage with these people in a positive, collaborative manner. And that's why I asked that local board part be put in there, because they are a crucial conduit for that information flow both ways. This city, we need a better deal.
Yes.
And I go out and talk to the people in the south, in Howick and Papakura and Franklin, and when you explain to them the situation and the holes that there are in the budget, they get it. They understand it. They understand the frustrations of the roads. So we need to work with the government for a more collaborative and positive approach for all these issues in the new year. We need a multimodal model of infrastructure. It's not just trains, it's not just buses, it's cars and cycling and walking and everything combined.
My reservations about the alternative funding process are well known. However, what we're dealing with here is the end game of that process, and God knows how much it actually costs. I think there is a consensual solution to the division in the governing body, and that is to use the LTP to consult with members of the public, and if there was a decision to proceed with these extra charges or taxes, then there should be the ultimate protection of a referendum in there, and that would actually solve the dilemma or the division that the governing body is trying to deal with. So we have funding challenges, but we have a cost crisis, to be honest with you. And my critique of the alternative funding process is that it's just focused entirely on trying to get more money out of essentially the same group of people without any looking or investigation or indeed curiosity about why our costs are so high. Now, I would much have preferred an even-handed approach to this.
The concern I've got, and certainly it's been reinforced as a board member with Auckland Transport, is our transport work is a work in progress. Anyone who thinks that the Auckland plan is the be-all and end-all is just nuts. We are only midway through the suite of issues that need to come before the public before we go out for a mandate. You know, I believe that we must go at some point for a formal mandate. So, you know, I'm kind of really split on this one.
I'm really worried about if you have a referendum and it's not binding now, but whatever, but you could be one of your options that could come up if there was a working party is let's not do anything. That would be a terrible thing if it came back that the majority of the population said in a referendum, don't do anything. Just leave the motorways as they are, leave the gridlock. Don't worry about it. I mean, where would that put us? That would put us in quite a bind, I would suggest. And then, and the cost, 1.5 plus the LTP, it's getting close to 0.2% of rates, among other things. That's quite a big chunk. But the beauty of the silliness of the whole thing is it doesn't matter whatever we come up with, the government can ignore us anyway. And to be quite honest, they've already given early indications. They're not particularly enthusiastic about any option at the moment. Funding us, motorway charges, fuel tax, and we kind of, where are we? I mean, I don't know.
Finally tonight we go to the rates cap debate. On November 5th, the Budget Committee debated the rates scheme for Auckland. A broad church of councillors wanted the rates transition cap extended for the second term of council, with the cap to be set at 20% of rates.
I'm a broken record. Consistent, reliable decision making. On the odd occasion it's been shoved down my throat. But that's exactly what we are about. We've got to be about that in this chamber, otherwise we're about nothing. And we were instructed to get a dollar for dollar. And that's where we're arrived at. And every 3 years, it just won't be these 3 years. It'll be 3 years' time. We'll have the same challenge and the same diversity of impact. It'll be a different set of ratepayers next time. But it'll be same, and we'll be always just tampering around the edges. Councillors, we can keep going back to the community, but this is the underlying challenge that we have, to actually make the decision. And it's not easy. But if we don't actually abide by the formula that sits in our statute, then we're always going to be Mickey ducking around the edges. Prime Minister's answer to Cam was absolutely the right one. Find the answer in the UAGC. You want an equity lever, that's the equity lever. Leave the underlying issue of whether you pay the same dollar for the same rate alone. We've arrived at that point. You want to keep changing that point, then change the whole rating system. But every 3 years we will have these same discussions. And, you know, what I am saying to you is that we know what the government's position is going to be on this. And we have got a lot of asks of the government, particularly around transport. So, I'm saying to you, be consistent.
Come March, we'll have a really good steer as to the government's mood and mind to this, and the public's mood and mind. And we might not feel comfortable with one, being able to push this through, or two, the public wanting us to do that. And so our end decision when we pass the long-term plan might not be this, but what we're actually putting here is the option for the public to consider it and for us to test the waters in Wellington as to whether it's a possibility for them to put it up their legislative order paper.
I think that it would take the sting out of this, because I think the way it's set up now, people are going to gulp if we follow what the Mayor's got here, send out the rates, because people have got their valuations, that's one thing, then they'd all clamour to get it. Now, if people can say, oh, they were anxious to see what their new valuations were, I think they were actually anxious to see what they were going to be up for in rates from the council. That's the way we see it on the shore, Mr Mayor. And, you know, the Kaipatiki situation, which is bizarre when you look at Kaipatiki, just about every suburb in Kaipatiki went up by an average of about 50% in their valuations, and you can see what the kick-on effect to that is as far as what they're going to have to pay in rates.
I'm hearing sort of two arguments. One is, oh well, we better go cold turkey now, versus, you know, let's blame the statutory environment that we're in. I think that if we had a determination to work with government on this, because you are going to see some real pain in the community, and the clear messages that come through from my community are that issue around diminishing income as people get older, the high levels of borrowings that they've gone through for many, many years, especially in the early years of property ownership, the services provided by council. And we all know that as we move ahead, a lot of the new investment is not going to be going into the suburbs that are actually feeling this pain the most. It's going to be because we've determined that the spatial priorities are such that we're going to put those investments into new growth.
Of course, we have the government's remission scheme, we have our postponement scheme, and if you're really desperate, if your house has gone up by 50% from 500,000 to 750, you could probably borrow a little money to cover that extra rates of $7 a week if you need be. So 85% of the ratepayers, the difference is either $7 up or down, and I saw the figures that was whisked away. 57,000 is still kind of over what we would like them to have, and then but there's almost equally 43 that are below, that are still waiting to get their rates dropped. So For me, I vote for same rates, same property value, and who knows what will happen in 3 years' time.
For a start, we've got a continuous debate on local government New Zealand, and all councils to greater or lesser degree have got the same problem. Ours is a problem to the extent, it's not a problem to the extent that if you're one of the 520,000 ratepayers of Auckland who own a home, your average increase in the asset has been nearly 35% over the last 3 years. It's a city that is hugely popular. People go there for jobs and education, a whole range of things. That is the challenge that we face to manage that. So in recognising that, recognising the amount of work that we've got going on, in the event that we agreed that we would go to the community with a no transition policy does not mean that we wouldn't continue to debate the possibilities of government assistance around transition. And all I have conveyed back to you is a reflection that the amalgamation provided us with a unique opportunity because the diversity of impact was that pronounced. But the whole purpose of going through that change was to arrive at one rate for one value. And councillors, even though we like to be pragmatic and move, all I'm saying to you is that having arrived at that point, to now depart it would seem to me to really fly in the face of what I thought was the underlying value of that position, and that was ultimate fairness. You pay the same rates for the same value.
Just kind of acknowledge my colleague Councillor Clow, who is probably in a more difficult position than any of us around the table. Half his ward are going to be winners, half his ward are going to be losers, and he's kind of holding the line around the integrity of the rates curve. The reality of this is, these are really hard decisions. So my concern, Mr Mayor, is if we go back to the government and say, look, we're having a tough time with revaluations, can you help us out, please? If we look at some of our provincial cousins around the region, they laugh at what we pay in rates. We can't go running to the government every time this feels hard, and we also can't be rushing out to our community to say, this is really hard, guys, can you make the decision? Because, can I just borrow this for a moment? Let's have a look at that table. We know what Kaipariki's going to say. We know what Howick's going to say. We can imagine what Henderson Massey will say. If people voted according to how it was going to impact on their own rates, we're going to get a pretty mixed picture. I know it's frightening, but sometimes we actually have to govern. And sometimes we actually have to look at a really sensible and sustainable way forward.
Many of the issues around revaluation and the high prices that parts of Auckland are experiencing are because of government policies. It's around housing supply and demand, speculation, capital investment, far too much in housing, and we can sheet home much of that to the government. And in principle, I don't think that the government can walk away from this, because if the government is proposing amalgamation in any other locations around Auckland, they're going to have to allow transition, because the differences in equity that you've got in other parts of New Zealand, especially up in Northland and elsewhere, are severe.
Thanks for watching the All About Auckland show. I hope you found the ideas interesting. To watch the show again or sign up for a newsletter, go to www.allaboutauckland.com. You can follow us on Facebook or via our Twitter handle, AllAboutAKL. See you next week.